Number three, no use of intoxicants. We know many arguments against the use of intoxicants. It is not a very difficult thing to understand because anyone with a sane mind will accept that taking intoxicants is physically, mentally, and spiritually detrimental. It destroys the principle of austerity because the reason people take drugs is they want to avoid their suffering in the material world. They do not want to face that austerity. Drugs, alcohol, tobacco, as well as any drink or food containing caffeine, cloud the mind, overstimulate the senses, and make it impossible to follow the principles of Bhakti Yoga. So let's start with the part that says anyone with a sane mind will accept that taking intoxicants is physically, mentally, and spiritually detrimental. So you drink, you get a hangover. You're not, maybe you're drunk or you're a little buzzed or something and you get in a car wreck. Or even maybe you say something you shouldn't have. And, there's cases where people, do things they wouldn't normally do and they're in legal trouble. And then spiritually, this detrimental as well because if you're spending time doing a bunch of intoxicants, whether it's weed, drugs, alcohol, etc., you're gonna affect your spiritual development. You're doing that, and then there's that recovery time. There's recovery from that hangovers, and even from my personal experience, when I look back my college days, you're like hungover from even something like weed. I always used to call it a weed hangover. It was like the next day you're kind of a little off. You might not be like in bed throwing up kind of thing, but you're you're not as motivated. Maybe you skip a workout, you get things don't get done. And I like that it talks next about the austerity. You're trying to get away from your problems. And I saw this once with myself. I remember with my ex-wife where she was essentially taking him away from me for a second time. And I just thought, oh, I need to go smoke a cigar to think about this. Like I just had this gut reaction. I kind of laughed at myself. I kind of remembered this. And in that moment, I'm trying to avoid my suffering. Doing Smoking a cigar isn't gonna change anything. It's not gonna make anything better for me. I realize that my time is better spent trying to actually resolve the issue than trying to run away from it. And because I talked to her and we worked it out and things I spent the energy and time to get things worked out versus, oh no, what I'm going to do, like, oh my God, this is happening. I'm just going to smoke a cigar. You can kind of run away to things. And I'm an addict on YouTube that was talking about how to get over addiction. It says a lot of people have something called a reserve. Essentially, it's if something in life happens, I'm allowed to do the intoxicant. So if my father dies, I get to do the drug. I get to do weed again. So that people put in a reserve for themselves, like okay, like a fire extinguisher, breaking the glass on the outside of a fire extinguisher, will say break in case of emergency. I that with cigars myself, where there's, I want a cigar under the stressful circumstances, but I don't generally smoke many cigars. So the break in case of emergency element, the reserve element, I think is where a lot of people get trapped in this cycle because you don't normally do it, but then you do it under that stressful situation, and then maybe a multiple stressful situations, and before you know it, get back on this path of being in your body over and over. And this even mentions, speaking of the austerity, the next line says drugs, alcohol, tobacco, as well as any food or drink containing caffeine, cloud the mind, overstimulate the senses. Coffee is a big problem for me. I used to make fun of the Mormons back in college of like, you can't even have coffee. Or if you have soda, you have to have caffeine free. And caffeine's not so bad. But then I looked into it. It is a stimulant. And I remember my sleep was messed up for decades because I started drinking coffee in college just to pull some all nighters on papers, and it made me feel good. And I really hadn't drunk coffee before, I think, my freshman year in college, like maybe here and there, but it was never, my parents weren't coffee drinkers. We didn't have it in the house. Like someone made fun of my mom once. They came over, they stayed the night, and like, you guys don't have coffee. Like they didn't, my parents didn't even have like instant coffee. Like my mom drinks tea occasionally, but there's like no coffee in the house at all, right? So I grew up in like a caffeine free environment. So when I found it, I was really interested in it. I was constantly drinking it. And the last 2 or 3 years, I've been off and on it, and now I kind of maybe have a third of a cup a day, but I'm trying to get completely off it because it is true. This stuff clouds the mind, overstimulates the senses. I find caffeine makes me more jumpy, more likely to interrupt somebody, more likely to not think through before acting or speaking or writing. Even at work, I notice it's good for the rote stuff, but if I have to think and respond to clients, that sort of thing, I find the coffee is good if I need to be extra talkative for a meeting or something. But I kind of try to use caffeine strategically more so now than a daily thing. I have a related story from Gandhi actually in This Was Bapu. It's like 100 anecdotes about people spending time with Gandhi before he died or was murdered, I should say. It's number 16 in his book. This Was Bapu, and it's called Goodbye to Tea. It says Gandhi enjoyed his afternoon cup of tea until one day I gave him a shock by asking him solemnly, though partly in jest, whether he could do without regularly drugging himself. He said, "What do you mean?" And he said it with an anxious voice. Well, I replied, "Isn't tea either a stimulant or a narcotic?" After a moment's reflection, he said gravely, "So it is." And from that day, tea was taboo. So that's the thing for myself. I kind of had that similar experience. You don't realize you are drugging yourself. It's a legal drug, and there's a reason why you're given 10-minute breaks at work partially too. Factories allowed coffee breaks. They'd buy the coffee. It's for more production. If a job is letting you take 10 minutes off every 4 hours, it's because drugging yourself, and then you crashing after your 8 hour shift's fine with them. They want the best you for 8 hours. And I think, my ex-wife used to say, and the wife of one of the pastors we knew used to say the same thing about him, where it's like they would say, "Oh, you're giving the best you to everybody else." And I kind of feel like caffeine is a driver of that in our capitalistic society. You use it as this worker bee drug, little worker bee hive doing all the to work so hard for the man kind of thing. I was already getting off caffeine before I read these, and just because I didn't like the sleep element, it was causing me to clench my teeth at night. I realized all these years I noticed that stopped when I was completely off coffee. And I find the more coffee I drink, the dentist is like, "Yo, it looks like you're clenching your teeth, this and that." And it's true because it's like and they wanted to, funny with our society, they kept trying to get me to pay for $100, $200 bite, like grinding guard. And I never paid for it because I'm like, I'm not paying for this. I want to find the source of the problem. I didn't know what was causing it. And then just by chance, when I stopped drinking all the coffee and all the bathroom breaks, so they just think, the stimulants aren't good for you, whatever it is. But just like Gandhi realizes, you are drugging yourself. You think you have this habit that isn't doing anything. So, obviously drugs and alcohol, it's pretty, there's not much to talk about there. It's obviously bad for you. It's obviously going to have a negative effect. Tobacco is an interesting one. I never smoke I didn't start smoking tobacco until 2023 actually. I think Osho said something like, if someone's smoking, something's eating their heart. It's kind of true. You have kind of a death wish if you're smoking tobacco in any capacity. You kind of, I think all the previous years, I kind of was trying to stay alive in a way. Like I had this thing about health, of trying to be super healthy. And even my mom's, when she found out I was smoking tobacco, she was like, "You've been careful so many years." And I just laughed because it's like, you're gonna die one day anyway. So I look at it, and I think any tobacco smoker has a element of this where it's like, if I'm taking 3 years off my life, 5 years off my life, etc., you're aware of that and you don't care. There's kind of like a slow suicide in a way, that you don't care that much, because I kind of feel that we all know the negative effects of tobacco. So if you're doing it, there's some element of you that doesn't care about living a long time. There's kind of like a death wish element. So I definitely have that, I believe, just because things got really hard for me in 2023. I I smoked a ton from 2023 to 2024. It was tough. Just everything was going wrong. And I look at it. I think Winston Churchill said something like, if he hadn't smoked the cigars, he didn't know if he'd be calm enough to have made it through certain situations. So I look back, it did serve a purpose for me. Now I haven't smoked my last cigar I smoked in December of 2025. But I will be smoking probably in a month from now. So I kind of use it now, much more limited capacity. Someday I'll give it up. I hope to give this stuff up eventually. And I also think this doesn't include some of our modern stuff. I think corn, I can't say it because YouTube will ban me here, but men, I think women, I know some women that look at it, but I think probably 99% of men at some point in their lives overdo that just because, our fathers and grandfathers and people in the past didn't have these internet connections. You weren't able to see this sort of stuff. So I kind of feel like that's I think that falls under this rule. And that's been somewhat of a struggle for me over the years. Definitely I've overused it at certain points, but now I'm trying to be completely off of it is my goal. And I'm trying to even go farther too with just, semen retention. I mean, not just the corn, but also not giving up your life force because there's science on it too that you have zinc is a hard thing to get into your system, and you're utilizing all these vitamins and minerals that you're expelling unnecessarily, and if you're overdoing it, that can have a detrimental effect. So I kind of think those go hand in hand. I'll probably do a video down the line on that as well. But I think that's implied here, the no use of intoxicants. I would consider corn an intoxicant. Following up on that, I would also include social media as that now. Like, we have kids that are addicted to social media. I mean, myself, like, I don't have any social media apps on my phone besides YouTube. Even that I really should probably remove. I try not to spend too much time on social media these days because I find myself doom scrolling, and before you know it, all this time has passed. I try to save my doom scrolling for, like, if I'm in bed trying to go to sleep, so it's not affecting anything. But I think social media, internet use kind of falls under intoxicant. It's kind of like you have the whole encyclopedia of human knowledge in your hand at all times. We're like a cyborg. So I kind of feel like you can get lost in that. You're watching people argue on forums, or you're watching videos, or shorts, YouTube shorts, or Instagram reels. You can kind of get in these feedback loops. So I kind of think the Maslow law of needs, it's like really all you need is food, water, and shelter. Um, and I kind of add with that, like, community, like sort of the Sangha element of, Zen or Hindu view, that you need kind of a group of aspirants. So there's a need for community as well. But outside of that, what do you really need? You don't need all this stuff. And I kind of think within this minimalism comes into play. I've gotten much more minimalist over the years. You own things, the more they own you. It's like the possessions start possessing you. You have to keep working to maintain a certain lifestyle, etc. I think Thich Nhat Hanh has a story, in No Mud, No Lotus, where there was a farmer, and he's scrambling around asking everyone, have you seen my cows? Have you seen my cows? He had a whole herd of cows, and they broke the fence down, and he can't find them. So he's running around town. Have you seen my cows? Have you seen my cows? He finally comes up to a group of monks, asks the same question, and they say, yeah, no, we haven't seen him. And once he's out of earshot, one of the monks says to the others, isn't it great we don't have any cows to lose? Right? It's like having that stress kind of creates that problem for you, where it's like if you didn't own those cows, you don't have to stress about the cows. You don't have to worry about it. Kind of why I think I'm not into home ownership in a way. I think David Goggins talks about this too in some of his videos, where he just wants to rent. We're gonna die anyway. He doesn't want to be tied to something. And even for myself, last night actually, I have like a cabinet under the sink, and I see water dripping from the corner of the cabinet and hitting the floor. So I'm like, oh crap. I open up under the sink, and there's like a giant puddle And so I'm like sitting there cleaning it up at 2 in the morning, and I'm like trying to just, I'm like, well, let me try to discover the leak because I need to make a maintenance request because I rent. And I'm like, it's Thursday night and I want to make sure I want to have the faucet so I don't have to keep getting water from the bathroom for the next week. So I scramble and make a note. The old me would have been cussing and angry, but the new me was kind of just like, it is what it is. This is me being upset about this isn't going to change anything. And in a way, in that moment, I was relieved that I don't own anything here. Like there's water damage, obviously, from the water sitting there. It looks like it'd been sitting there for probably a day. Wood's permanently damaged once it gets that wet, right? It's going to start warping. And it was at first I was all worried. And I'm like, wait, this isn't my house. This isn't my cow. This is their cow, right? And when I sent the maintenance request, of course, the next morning, 10 a.m., I have the knock on my door because they're going to take it seriously. This is their cow. They have to worry about their cow. Guy came in, he replaced my faucet probably in 30, 45 minutes. Everything was good, didn't cost me anything. But it's not even about the money for me. It's about not having the herd of cows to chase after. This isn't my house. And if it got so damaged or it was moldy, they'd have to replace it. It's not my fault. Faucet leaked, right? Versus if I own the house, now I'm having to call a plumber, and now I'm worried about now I have, that now it's turned into this thing. Research on a house, unless you buy it cash outright, renting for 30 years or a mortgage for 30 years comes out to the same because of all the maintenance, insurance, yada yada, fees, all that stuff. So it's kind of like unless you bought your house outright, it's actually not saving you money in the long run. Obviously after 30 years, yes, you're saving money, but most people move at some point. You're probably selling the house. That happened to my cousin. It's like you bought a house, now you're moving to you have a new job, you have to move. I kind of like, to be a Rolling Stone. I think the Irish saying is, it's just a Rolling Stone gains no moss. I kind of take that attitude towards life. I don't want to be tied down by something physical. Something like my son is with my ex-wife the bulk of the time in Sacramento. So I'm happy to stay in Sacramento, be closer to him. So I don't mind being tied down by something like that, but I don't want to be tied down by an actual worldly possession. I don't want it to be like I own a house here, and like if I didn't have a son, I'm just living in Sacramento for the rest of my life just because I like sunk all my cash into this. I'm house poor or something. I kind of feel like our society sets you up to need these intoxicants. That's I guess where I'm going with this. It's these intoxicants can lead to a life of stagnation. You're just kind of doing your same life. You smoke your cigarettes or you smoke your weed or you drink your alcohol on the weekend and you do it all again the next week. It keeps you in a state like it's saying here. It says it clouds the mind, overstimulates the senses, and makes it impossible to follow the principles of bhakti yoga. Let's replace that with just spirituality. Let's say impossible to follow the principles of your specific faith. If you're doing all these intoxicants, whether you're Christian, Muslim, etc., it's not it's not something good. I think, for example, in Islam, I think you're not allowed to drink alcohol, and there's dietary restrictions, no pork, and this and that. You're not allowed to do certain things. There's a wisdom in that. There's a wisdom in not wasting your time on these things, and I think it also leads to a more focus on a godly sort of spiritual life where you're not focused on physical pleasure. You're searching for more. You're kind of searching for the divine pleasure. You're searching for something beyond. You're searching for that inner peace instead of kind of trying to find safe harbor in an intoxicant, trying to find your way to release a pain at the bottom of a bottle. I've never had like a serious addiction, so I can't speak on that. I know some people have kind of been to hell and back, but for me, I can see how this stuff can turn into that. Even for me, for cigars, I think one year I smoked like 60 cigars in a 365-day period, which is pretty insane. And I remember I was having like COPD-ish um, symptoms. And, because at first I wasn't having a problem. And then, it's kind of that old saying, everything in moderation. But I don't even believe in moderation. Um, I believe it should be zero. And even with finances, I remember I used to follow the Frugal Woods online, and they had a thing about budgets for like things that are not essential, like food, water, shelter. Like they don't like budgets because if you have a budget, it means you're gonna end up spending. So if you say, "Oh, I have a $200 entertainment budget each month," you're more likely to spend that $200, but the goal should be zero for spending. It's like not that you can't have a budget, but you shouldn't be like, oh well, you know, I have a $200 budget for entertainment per month, and I haven't spent it for 3 months, so I have $600 to spend this month. It should be the it just resets to the next month, and you don't get to spend what you got previously. Like that's really helped me. That I when they said that, they said my internal view all these years on kind of minimalism. The budget ideally should be zero. Like try to have fun without spending money. Try to have fun without intoxicants. And that's the thing too. The intoxicants are expensive. Even for me, I have a cigar collection. I wasted so much money on these cigars, and I regret spending so much on cigars.